And I do believe StreamYard has let us in and lowered the gate. All right, everyone, welcome to Masculine Geek number 135, where we have returning guest, Mr. Quintus Curtius. If you don't know who Quintus is, you're a huge pudwhack, and Quintus has been on. Quintus is, if you follow Quintus on Twitter, on social media, and read his blog and listen to his podcast and know his books, me talking about an intro is worthless. So let's dive right into it. We're going to be talking about your latest work, your latest translation, Tusculan Disputations, correct?
Yes, sir. Hey, and thanks, guys, for having me on. I appreciate it, James um, and Vince. Happy to be here, and let the let the questions rip.
Excellent. Now, this one in particular, you were mentioning before we went live. This has not had a translation, and really an accurate translation, done in how many years?
Well, when I started looking at this and really started to get into this, I think it's part of a translator's job to kind of at least look at what's been done in the past. And it just from the research I had done, it didn't seem to. I couldn't find any complete English translation of the Tusculans more recent than the the edition for the Loeb series, which came out in 1927.
Hmm.
And there's some that are earlier than that from the 19th century, and there's been some partial translations if you can find on Amazon, like someone will do book 1 or book 5 or something, but there's no complete annotated modern rendition of this work, since the 20s, and I just was surprised at that. So that was one of the factors that kind of suggested to me the time was right for a new look at it.
Okay. Now, content-wise, what does this one comprise?
Well, it's a series of dialogues that and the treatise is separated into 5 books. Each book deals with a separate topic. The first book deals with the question of why we should not be afraid of death. The second book deals with how we can endure pain, how pain can be endured. The third book is on the alleviation of distress, or how to soothe sorrow, or how to soothe anxiety.
Hmm.
And the fourth book is basically looks at other disorders of the mind, other mental distresses and things like that. And the fifth book really talks about why virtue is enough for living a happy life. And you know, these are the types of questions that are so fundamental and so important. I think anyone could be interested in looking at this, even if they may not agree with the answers. I think just the process of going through the questions and hearing people talk about it
Hmm.
is worth it. So basically, you've got a series of like a dialogue. You've got Cicero or someone proposing a topic, and then Cicero giving his opinion on it. Other people coming back with interjections and comments, and him responding. So it's an engaging format, and the only thing that might make it a little bit of a challenge, maybe to the modern reader, is there's references there to a lot of names and places and quotations from dramas and poetry and things like that. But I try to put footnotes. Well, I have everything is footnoted and explained so that
Hmm.
anyone picking this up can say, okay, who was so and so, or what was this city, or what was this battle, or what was this, and you just go right to the bottom of the page, you can see it, boom. There's no interruption in reading comprehension. And the language is modern. It's none of this run-on sentences and these convoluted Victorian English that makes no sense, which I always hated. I always
Yeah.
hated, because that's not really the way people talked even in those days. And so I really hope that any interested reader or ambitious reader or anybody who's just curious about these things will find this to be something they can get something out of.
Hmm. Was that a function of a strict literal translation, like word for word, without putting any kind of nuance?
Well, that's a good question, and talked a little bit about that in the foreword to the book. I talk a little bit about the different theories of translation. There's some people think that an absolute literal rendering of every single sentence is a good way to go. Some people think that you should try to also err on the side of getting the gist of it. I mean, my own thoughts have been, you've got to combine both. I've always tried to err on the side of strict adherence to the text. It's not my job. It's not my responsibility. In fact, I'd be doing an injustice to the text if I were to just take liberties with it. I mean, I think I'm very strict about keeping a literal sense, but at the same time, certain sentences that are very long in Latin can make sense in Latin. You can't necessarily reproduce those word for word in English, and if you try to do that, it's going to sound very clumsy. So it's a judgment call, man. It all comes down to judgment. It's like a chef putting together a dish. One chef is going to have his own take on it. One chef is going to use a little bit more cream in the mix. Some is going to add more peppers. One is going to add a little bit more oregano. But you've got to try to give it a Ciceronian flavor, no matter what you do.
Literally, yeah.
Right.
Okay. We have a question from Robert in the chat. James, you want to read that for us?
Robert Guzlin says, how influence, I think he meant to say, how much influence do you think Cicero was to men like Adams, Jefferson, etc.?
That's a good question, Robert, and I think the answer is quite influential. The educational system in those days, in the 18th century, was very much classically based, and I know. I don't know personally. I know Adams for a fact. I remember reading. There was a book that came out. I think I've got it on my shelf here. I can't remember the title of it. There was someone that wrote a book on the influence of the founding father, or the influence of classical texts on the founding fathers. I can find it if I suppose if I look hard enough here. But it wasn't a bad book. But on a guy like Adams, Cicero, John Adams was very, very much into the classics, and so was Thomas Jefferson. Washington, not so much. I mean, Washington was not what I would call a scholarly guy. He respected learning, and he knew it was valuable, but he was not much of really a reader. So the answer is it depends on the person, but on the whole, Cicero was very influential on the founding fathers, much more so than I think, because in those days that was expected. I mean, every learned man, every educated man was expected to know Latin to some extent, and even if they didn't know Latin, they would have read him in translation, the ones that existed at the time. So I think it's only really in the 20th century that a lot of classical learning has been phased out of the curriculum, we're still paying the price for that today, I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a huge problem. Now, as far as your more recent translations, are these making their way into libraries?
Oh. As far as I know, I mean, the distribution is pretty wide. I've been contacted by, a few professors and assistant professors and interested parties all over the world, and they use them in classes. And I mean, this book was only released just in August, just a few weeks ago, so I guess it's going to take some time, but I know On Duties has gained a very, very large following and has a very, very large circulation, and the same thing with the Sallust translation. So they're making their way out there. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Now, how long did this one take you to put together?
Oh man, I would say almost. It was definitely over a year and a half. It was so close to 2 years, and just because. And this is something that's kind of hard to explain if you've never actually been in a situation where you have to translate something. You have to every sentence, every word of every sentence you have to dwell on, you have to tease it out, you have to give it its proper flavor. A lot of times you'll end up looking up words in dictionaries, looking at context. I mean, it's just a very, very laborious process, and it's not something where you can just kind of lay your eyes on a text and just crank out a good product. It has to be generated, it has to be refined, perfected, and that just takes time. I mean, it was happy labor, though. I enjoyed doing it, but it's definitely labor.
I would imagine so, and exhausting by the time you're finished your whatever you're writing and translating session time that you have for yourself. And that's a question too. How long do you dedicate? I'm assuming you do a little bit every day.
Oh yeah. My routine was to do something every day. I just think you need a daily schedule. I would pretty much occupy myself in the evenings because I have responsibilities as a lawyer during the day, and I have a regular job to go to. But my nocturnal labors. There's a great word in Latin to describe work done at night called a lucubratio. Lucubratio, like nocturnal labor. So there's a specific word for that. Yeah. So I was, and you'd be surprised, you can get a lot done at night when your mind is relaxed and you can kind of just kind of let it rip.
Yeah, right. There's kind of a, not to get old fortune cookie, there's sort of a magical quality to working at night. The moon might be full. It might be cold out. You're all comfortable inside. You got your coffee, your drink, and then you're taking care of your writing.
Oh yeah. Cool. Well, after this, I definitely needed a couple drinks after this was over. even while it was going on. So I'm
sure. You had mentioned something about taking a break too, not doing anything for the rest of the year.
Oh, well, I mean, every week I've always been posting an essay on my blog every week, every Saturday or Sunday I put something out there. So I'm going to be active with that. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just saying I'm not going to start any more projects until 2022. I just think I need a few months of just chill.
Exactly.
I just need. I mean, I say that now. Maybe I'll feel differently in a couple months. But the mind is always working, Vince. Always working.
Don't I know it? Jesus, holy shit! Anything on the painting front, by the way? I've been meaning to ask you that. I forgot to ask you that when we met out in Kansas.
No, man. I haven't. I did. What was it? Twilight Baboon, what was it called? I did that.
Sunset Baboon.
Sunset Baboon. That's
Sunset
right.
Baboon.
Even I can't even remember the titles of my own paintings. I did that. What was it? Last year, 2020, I think. Yeah, really 2020. And I haven't done anything since then. I just haven't had time. Everything has been Tusculan Disputations, Tusculans. I just haven't had time, and maybe at some point I'll return to the.
You need a translator baboon where he's like he's working at night by candlelight and he's hunched over a text.
Yeah, I think I need to do something. I think that to complete the baboon trilogy, there needs to be something like in the morning, like sunrise.
Sunrise baboon.
Yeah, like something more positive, like rising like a phoenix out of the morning sun. Rays of light streaming into his mind, something because the last one was kind of ominous. It's kind of apocalyptic. I was looking at it. It's on one of my walls here downstairs, and I was like, man, this is kind of a depressing painting. I hope I didn't go overboard on that one, but that's where I was in 2020, man. Once these lockdowns started, I was not happy.
There's a sign of the times.
I was not happy.
I think a sunrise baboon is in order. Definitely. I think it behooves you to hit us with a sunrise baboon.
I think you're right. I think that may be a good change. That might be something to work on before the end of the year. That could be a good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. Kind of mix things up a bit.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so man, usual things going on, just trying to stay stay busy, stay positive. We're all kind of trying to dodge the nibblers and the freaks. It's just
depressive knob nibblers. That one of your last tweets
man.
had me laughing out loud.
Oh man, it's a full-time job. They're everywhere.
It's unbelievable. They're like horse shit. They're everywhere.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What are you going to do? What can you do?
And just keep like you said, keep the fires burning. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward.
Keep crunching, man.
Absolutely.
So what's the? Sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please ask away.
My eyes keep that Doc Savage thing on the framed. Is that an original, like a magazine or what? A comic book? What is that?
Oh yeah, that was the Street and Smith cover when Doc Savage first came out. This is the first iteration. There were two different illustrations, renditions of Doc done, and this is the first one where he had more of a
nice
contemporary hairstyle, and then the second one, which I think was done by James Bama, had more of it as a skull cap.
Now, was that in the 30s or the 40s? When
that was the 30s. I want to say 33.
Wow.
32, 33. And that's where the original name of the Fortress of Solitude came from. A lot of people think it originated with Superman, but the Fortress of Solitude is attributed to Doc Savage. That's where he went to get away, to go ahead and focus and come up with new inventions, new plans and plots for the making the world better, as it were.
We all need a refuge, man.
Absolutely.
We all need a refuge. We all need an asylum. and maybe in more ways than one, more sense than one.
You're not kidding. Jesus Christ, yes. But getting back to Tusculan Disputations, you were mentioning that it was basically men that were wrestling with basic questions of life.
Right.
Anxiety and sorrow, and I know there's grief as well. And just how men came to terms with those on a daily basis and what they did to alleviate those states, as it were, I guess you could say.
Right.
So, what would you say for for someone coming into philosophy, maybe for the first time or wanting to get back? Maybe they took it in college and are just like, this doesn't really affect me at all. What would you have them start with Tusculan Disputations or anything else of Cicero's?
No, I think this is probably the best introductory text of all of his philosophical treatises, whether it's on duties, on moral ends, Stoic paradoxes, on the nature of the gods, because this book. In this book, Cicero's goal was to introduce the Roman public to the study of philosophy, and so he was. This book was meant for a wide audience. Okay, it was not meant for specialists. If you've read On Moral Ends, it deals with a very kind of narrow and specific question. Maybe not a narrow question, but a very specific question. And it can be technical at times because he's looking at a specific question from the point of view of different philosophical schools. But with Tusculan Disputations, you've got 5 fundamental basic life questions. And the unifying theme of this work is really how to live a happy life. What are the ingredients? What things do we need to really live a happy life? What are the components of that? And I just don't see how anyone cannot be interested in these questions. I just don't think any thinking person at least should have some curiosity about it. So the language is clear, the treatment of the ideas is straightforward, and it's presented in a dialogue format, which makes it very accessible. So I think that this is probably on duties is very popular because I think it's I think it deals with a question. It's presented as advice to a son, and it really talks about how to deal with conflicts, ethical conflicts, moral problems. What do you do when expediency conflicts with moral rectitude? And everyone's dealt with that too. And that is certainly something that everyone should explore. But Tusculan Disputations is a good introduction to philosophy in general, because it brings it out of the skies and down to earth, and it's dealing with real questions that are important to us today. How to be happy.
Hmm.
You know, who doesn't want to know that?
Yeah, that's true, especially in these times.
Valuable
Exactly.
information.
Yes, sir.
What was that, James?
So it's valuable information.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I agree with you. I agree. And, you know, I think anyone, even someone with a background, say, in as I was going through this, it just kind of struck me that, you know, a lot of these conclusions are the same conclusions that modern psychology has come up with. You know, how to prevent our minds from fixating on anxiety, how to cure ourselves of certain types of fears and worries, and you know, these habits that we do, just techniques of getting the mind off something by focusing on something else, by telling ourselves that, you know, we create our own, in many ways, we create our own anxieties by thinking we should feel something. We think we should worry about something. We put it on ourselves because we think it's going to help us, and it really doesn't help us. You know, so, you know, even if you don't agree with the conclusions, or you don't think that you're getting anything out of it, I just think going through the steps of reading a book like this, it's going to sink into your mind somehow, and you're going to come back to it later. You will come back to it later. Maybe 10 years, 20 years, but you will.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. It's something that I find reading works such as this, when I am having a difficult time for myself, I find it comforting. Each time I come back to it, I look for that. I read philosophy for that aha moment. Like, maybe I'll at this moment in my life, this issue that I'm having, this paragraph, this chapter, whatever that I'm reading, I can find something in it new that I could use in my own life, or will help me in some fashion. Right.
I agree, man. I just think books like this, you know, modern philosophy just doesn't deal with practical subjects. It's all this, you know, I don't know, logic and all this abstractions and things. And that's what I like about classical ancient philosophy, is it deals with the real world, you know, things that matter to the average person, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what people really want to hear. I don't need to know, you know, dialectical materialism and all this other stuff. I don't, you know, that's just not something that's going to do anything for me. And I respect that. And I think it's important to be aware of those questions, but they don't really excite the imagination.
No, they don't resonate. Something about the classical works, that because they've stood the test of time, and they are basic unifying concepts that are just that speak to us through the ages. It's like the more things, or I should say, nothing really changes over the years. I mean, the more things we think change, the more it stays the same. And these questions stay the same. They have plagued men for good or for ill for countless years. And like I said, when I go back and read this, it's comforting to me somehow. So
I think it is, because it lets you know that you're not alone. I think if you know that a famous individual, someone that had a very distinguished career, had a lot of struggles in his life, if he's just as worried about these questions as we are, then that lets us know that, hey, we're not alone, and we don't need all this other stuff to come to grips with our own issues. You know, we can, you know, they didn't have, you couldn't reach for a tranquilizer in his days. You couldn't, well, maybe they drank, maybe people
had some wine
got drunk,
or
you know,
shit,
they had other, there's always ways to, but I just think that we're way too addicted to the pharmaceutical solution to these types of moral problems, when we should be thinking about our own selves and looking some of these questions square in the eye. And we're seeing now the consequences of fear of death. And what are we seeing for the past year and a half? People afraid of death.
Yeah.
I mean, so afraid, so paralyzed, irrationally, unreasonably, that they're willing to destroy society to make themselves feel safe.
Yep.
And that's really what we have. We have a moral, and I've been saying this over and over and over again. We have a moral crisis. We have a population that, frankly, is just so lacking in any type of spiritual depth or reflectiveness. Or this is just because these things aren't part of the educational system anymore. Everyone is thrown into a ball of anxiety over the slightest inconvenience to their lives or the slightest chance they might experience some discomfort. How pathetic is that? How truly pathetic. And they're willing to destroy you and me and everybody else, our livelihoods, just to make themselves feel better. Because they spent their whole life, they've spent their whole lives doing unhealthy things mentally and physically. And this is where we're at.
Yeah. I think partially, well, maybe even more than partially, technology has pushed that along. Our need for instant gratification.
That's right.
We're almost trained to want information now. I mean, safety doc, Doc Purdon's in the chat, and he was writing about that very thing in his newest upcoming book, The Velocity of Information. Yeah, we're constantly inundated. I mean, whether we want it or not. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't turn on your phone without getting hit with some bullshit.
No, it's just, something's got to give. We're going to have to make some major changes, man. And I'm hoping that last year will be a wake-up call. I don't know. I don't know. We just don't know really where things are headed, what the trajectory is. Maybe we're going to have to experience such a deep societal reset that we're going to have to be forced to reevaluate what's important in life. But we just can't keep going on like we're doing, man. It's not sustainable.
No.
It's not sustainable.
What do you see? Do you see an endpoint? Or do you think the goalposts are just going to keep moving?
I just don't know, man. That's I think one of those questions where you get 10 people lined up and you're going to get 10 different answers. One thing I do know is that change can happen a lot more rapidly than people think. And I say change, I mean all types of change: political change, social change, economic change. Especially in today's world where things move with the velocity with which things move, we just don't know. We could go on, people could go on, just keep getting more and more obese and more IQs declining more and more every year for another 20 years. Or, we could wake up in 2 or 3 years and find out that the whole system is changed. Like when people woke up in the late 80s or early 90s and found out that the Berlin Wall came down or the Soviet Union was no more. We just don't know. We don't know. And what my fear is, as a patriotic American, as someone that cares about his country, what I'm worried is that we experience some catastrophic military defeat. Like I tweeted a few days ago, the Russian fleet was blown out of the water in 1905 by the Japanese at the Straits of Tsushima. Catastrophic defeat for Tsarist Russia, which ushered in basically a decade of instability and social unrest. I don't know. But what's worrying me is I'm not seeing any good leadership at the top. Our civilian and our military leaders seem to be very, very rigid, ossified, unwilling to listen to criticism, unwilling to take criticism, unwilling to make reforms. I mean, we've been talking about these things for almost 2 decades now, and there's been no movement. They've known that they need to reform the financial system for 2 decades. Nothing has happened. They know they need to reform the educational system for 2 decades. Nothing has happened. The infrastructure of the country drastically needs to be rebuilt. We need fresh blood in there, man. We need fresh blood. And my hope is that the young generations, the Zoomers and the millennials and the Zoomers, the young guys coming up who have been stuck holding a bag of shit, are going to step up to the plate and get into politics and start making waves and start doing things that our generation, the Gen X generation, didn't do, and that certainly the Boomers didn't do.
Forget about that. Forget about them now. Exactly. There's a lost cause.
There's nothing there's nothing to be done. They just need to. They just need to pass away from the scene. They need to just down and They just need to be edged off the scene and go into retirement, and that's it. I'm so done with them.
I would have been satisfied if you had stopped with pass away, but the rest of what you said was also fine.
Well, you can, James, you can pick whatever euphemism you want in that string of ideas, but my point is that we need fresh blood.
Correct.
Okay, we need new ideas. And that's why I tell anyone who will listen that run for office, get involved, do something, start businesses. We need guys, don't abandon the playing field. The mistake that the Gen X, that my generation did, is we sort of kind of sat back and assumed.
We just said, fuck it.
That slacker. I was never that. I was never that way. I know you were never that way, but
no. But I watched it around me. Yeah,
there definitely was an ethos in the 80s and 90s of just take a chill, man. Just see how it goes, man. Everything's great, and it's all somewhere in the middle. The truth is somewhere in the middle. No, the truth is not somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it's at one extreme or the other. I just think that if we had more leaders willing to stand up and to call things by their true names and to say what they believed and to actually put their balls on the line, like that lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps who was, relieved of command recently. You remember that guy?
Oh yeah.
All he was saying was, where is the acceptance of responsibility here? Where's the accountability? We don't expect perfection, but we do expect some of you guys up top to put your ass on, to put your balls on the line. Stop hiding behind your careers and your gigs and your uniforms. That's what you're there for. You're there to take the hits.
Exactly. And we're sorely lacking with those individuals right now. It's the horizon is dead.
As Civil War history, Vince. That how many dorks did Lincoln have to go through? He went through one dunce. The peacetime military just breeds organization. It breeds a certain skill in bureaucracy that is not the skill you need when the bullets are flying down range. You need snake eaters. When the lead is going down range, you need snake eaters. You need people that can make decisions. You need guys who can get the job done. You need men who can get in there, close with, locate, and destroy, and make progress. And those traits are not rewarded in peacetime.
No.
In fact, they're punished.
Yeah. It's completely the opposite. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a fact. It's just a fact. And we're all very upset about it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, in the movie or TV show Band of Brothers, there's Foxhole Norman, who's head of Easy Company, and he's this classic West Pointer. He's just going through the motions. He's a career politician, military officer. He sees his command over these guys in the Ardennes Forest during the Battle of the Bulge as being just something he's got to do the checklist before he can move up in command. Right. And then there's the attack on Foy. Puncher. Right, and there's the attack on Foy, and he completely freezes up. He's hiding behind a haystack with all his guys, and they're going to get targeted by artillery. And so finally, Winter sends in Ronald Spears, who just completely turns the situation around. He runs right through the enemy lines and hooks up with another company that's circling around the town. And then he goes and runs back through the town, like right past German soldiers who are just sitting there gawking at him. They can't believe he's actually doing this, So yeah, but what's kind of sad is even in World War II, you saw this during this very important war. You had these kind of career guys. Now it wasn't as bad as it is now, and it wasn't as bad as it was maybe even in Vietnam. You had guys at the top who were smart enough to know stuff, but there was still politics. I mean, another example is when they during World War II they had to pick two fronts that they only one of two fronts that they could resupply. It was Patton's or Montgomery's, and they decided to go with Montgomery's, and it mostly was for political reasons. And if Patton had been reinforced with the fuel that he needed, he could have been in Berlin very quickly. Because I did a report on this back in college. The Siegfried Line had been completely stripped of all of its equipment and guns, and they'd shipped it over the Eastern Front. They weren't even re-equipping it until roughly the time of Operation Market Garden occurred. But they thought they were going to end the war by Christmas. So this is an example of where politicking can come into play. And so I think that's I can't remember who it was, but they said that war just cuts out the crap and clarifies stuff in the like who can actually do their job and who can't.
Yeah. Well, but a lot of it too. What Patton was talking about is having a sense of duty and sticking to it. There are few and far between the leaders that actually have a modicum of a sense of duty at all, and a willingness to see things through.
Right. I mean, I don't know if TJ was wanting to talk, but my own personal view is, look, no one expects perfection, but what we do expect is you to try. Mm-hmm. I mean, all that I think the lower ranks expect from their bosses up top is to, sometimes you got to fall on your sword for your people. Sometimes you have to fall on your sword for your men. Sometimes you've got to take the hits. You got to do something. You're expected to fucking try. You're expected to do something, not sit on your ass and go in front of Congress and say everything is great and I tried hard. No one wants to hear that. You know, and I know for a fact that a lot of the stuff that these guys tell Congress, they don't believe themselves, and yet they'll get up there and they just say what they are required to say. They say what's politically expedient, and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not putting their balls on the line. They're not trying, and that's my. This is an endemic problem. It's not just there. It's in. So many,
it's in
everywhere.
Nobody
wants to. Yeah, right. Because the whole society has been converged by this chicken shitism, this chicken shit mentality where nobody wants to look. No one wants to offend anybody. Nobody wants to be the one. No one wants to be a hard ass. Nobody wants to do anything that might cause someone to feel bad. It's a zero defect mentality. We used to call it. You know, and this is what is going to get our asses handed to us unless we smarten up. And, you know, realistically, it's not going to change until there's such a catastrophic disaster that it has to change. And all we can do is hope that the snake eaters out there are waiting in the wind and are going to be willing to take up the reins and to get a hold of the steering wheel before the car goes off the cliff. That's all we can hope for, because, man, it is pretty depressing to see some of this stuff.
It's depressing now.
You know, but we need a cultural renewal. We have to aim for nothing short of a full-on cultural educational renewal. We have to start with the younger people, the young generations. We've got to reshape them and train them and teach them into what matters, what masculine virtue is, what moral rectitude is, what fortitude is, physical fitness, leadership, all these things. We've got to get back to that because no one else is doing it. Nobody cares. No one is doing anything. And if we don't do it, no one is going to do it. And I tell you, sometimes you get so goddamn mad at these people who sold us out. It just really, you know, it puts hatred in your heart, man. It really does sometimes.
It does.
Yeah. Because it was all so unnecessary. It's unnecessary. But this is what wealth, and this is what leisure, this is what luxury do. It corrupts. We spent 40 years getting corrupted.
Well, Teddy Roosevelt talked about that.
To the core of our being.
Soft, yeah, that's soft feminine influence he saw over men. Especially with the rise of industrialization.
I was talking about this with one of my relatives yesterday because we've been following this whole Afghanistan thing, and then we were talking about some of the stuff that happened, just the American perspective in World War II regarding how the French and the English and others responded once the tide had turned in that war. And the thing that we kind of realized is that America's never really, outside of or since the Civil War, America's not really been in a fight for its life. And then you'd have to even go back to the War of 1812, where it's literally fighting for its own survival and its own independence.
Right.
And we've been so blessed. We've never, like World War I and II, we never got bombed. We didn't have to worry about being invaded like the English did. We weren't occupied like the French were. We weren't in a drawn out knuckle fight like the Russians were with the Germans. So we just haven't really had to suffer.
It's been very abstract.
It's been very abstract.
Right,
So, anyway, and even during the War on Terror, you got to go fight them over there so we can import them over here.
Right.
Like it's always over there. Like that song from World War I. Over there, we're going over there. It's always over there. Well, the fight. Meanwhile, the real fight has always been here. It's just not a war fought with guns and bullets.
That's it. Violence is always abstract until it winds up in your living room.
Right.
That's the long and short of it.
That's right.
And you're right, TJ. We haven't had to deal with that in what 100 years.
Yeah, and I think that is what people. A lot of people tend to not like the movie Red Dawn, but I thought it made the director was making a good point when he was talking about why he made the film. He said, "I wanted to show Americans what it's like to fight a total war on your own soil." Because that concept does not, it's an abstract. So here's what it might look like. And, it never ended up happening that way, but that's what it would look like. And we don't know what the future is going to hold, and America's the other thing is it's such a big country. And even during World War II, the only thing we had to worry about from the Japanese was they might, bomb Seattle and Los Angeles and San Francisco, which in hindsight,
not a great loss, really.
In hindsight, they might have done us a favor, but that's it. Like the Japanese, I was again talking about this with one of my relatives. There's no way they could have invaded us. It took the largest amphibious fleet in history to cross the English Channel, and we were not having to deal with a hostile local populace. We just had to deal with an occupying force. They would have had to have invaded basically something incredibly larger, and they would have been dealing with the most armed population in the history of the world. So there hasn't been a visceral fear of losing everything. So I think now what that looks like or what it's going to take to shape people up, I don't know. Maybe it's going to have to take some some actual traditional conventional war battle with the Chinese or Russians. I don't know. But I think that I think things are much more fragile and weak than a lot of people want to admit.
Well, you may be right. All I can say is I don't think any competent enemy would ever invade us. I think that would be just the opposite, the worst thing to do, because that tends to unite a population. I think a smart enemy would simply just let us consume ourselves in social decay and unrest, and just sit by and just let us stew in our own juices.
Yeah,
I think that's what China's game plan.
Smart enemy would just let us keep giving them money.
Yeah,
we're the world's biggest customer. It doesn't. None of this shit about getting attacked at home is even remotely possible at this point.
Right.
We just give shit away.
Yeah.
Who's going to attack? The only people who point guns at us are people we live with at home.
Yeah.
We have the police who tax you for all of your money, half of your money, and then the other half of your money, depending on how you want to look at it. We live in an authoritarian state.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of softness either. It's just contrition. Do X, Y, Z, or we will escalate consequences until we shoot you. Proportional to your resistance.
Yeah.
I think anything else, which is why, by the way, you probably shouldn't expect Zoomers to step into positions of leadership, because any decent person from my generation is not going to go near Congress or mayorships or anything of that variety.
They may surprise you.
I think that it's
No, I said decent people. Any from my generation
Well,
is not going to go near that.
I think
that's a distinction. For
No,
you right
let
there,
me finish, because it is the realm exclusively of scumbags pointing guns at other people to take their money. That is what it is at the moment. It is a giant multi-level marketing scheme to
At the
consume
moment.
money. That's what it is.
I think that
It's
crises.
almost always been like that. Yes.
Yeah, but I think that crises tend to destabilize the prevailing status quo and allow unexpected leadership to emerge. And regardless of how people feel about them, I just bring it up because it's an example. During the English Civil War, Cromwell was this nobody farmer from the English rural area, and he had no military experience whatsoever, but he turned into this very brilliant cavalry commander. And he was, in fact, so effective on the battlefield that when Parliament passed a bill prohibiting members of Parliament from being in the military, they made an explicit exemption for him to allow him to continue fighting. So, and then you've got, other guys, I'm trying to think of some others off the top of my head where they just were kind of obscure nobodies, and then they just whatever brings them into the spotlight. Maybe even like I was reading about T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, who somebody once said that he backed up into the limelight. He was trying not to get attention, but just his circumstances and who he was enabled that. I agree that right now it's not possible. And in fact, if anything, it's shown that the current system is designed to keep out decent people, which is why the silver lining is that when it becomes weak enough, then true leaders can come in and actually deal with the problem. Because in my opinion, what you have are at the very top, the cream of la cream is the most dysfunctional, incompetent people on the planet, but they're surrounded by people who are just competent enough to keep things running and to protect the leaders.
Yeah.
And they see these broken people. Yeah, like, for example, Nancy Pelosi is not going to be enforcing any of the laws she passes. Joe Biden's not enforcing it. It's not Kamala Harris. It's some grunt. It's some ordinary officer. It's some bureaucrat, whoever it is, somebody who's competent enough to actually do the job, but they are brainwashed enough to take orders from them. So, but we're reaching the point where there's not enough competent people. For people who've read Animal Farm, we're running out of boxers. The whole just says, I will work harder, Napoleon's always right. They're all dying off, and they're not being replaced by more boxers. They're being replaced by people who are, like Quintus was saying, they spout the party line. They're ideologically correct, but you know what? A woke waste management guy who doesn't know how to handle sewage, like that's going to be a problem at some point.
We pretend to work, they pretend to pay us.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
we're operating from two slightly different worldviews, where I view these people as just being evil. Like, they're evil scumbags that they need to be
physically removed.
People can finish that thought inside their head. Nothing to do with crosses, telephone poles, and I-95. But no, it's these people are evil. They're it's a top-down societal structure in which you just keep enforcing things at the point of a gun. Like, how much, Vince, how much money would I have to pay you to go to a 6-year-old girl's lemonade stand and disassemble it? Quintus, how much money would I have to pay you to go to a 6-year-old girl's lemonade stand and disassemble it, because she's not legally allowed to send that?
I wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it for any amount of money. So
how about you, TJ?
A G10. Just kidding. from the movie. What was the movie? Tropic Thunder.
Yeah. No, I'm completely fair. But every guy wearing a badge in your local hometown has decided that their shitty salary is enough for that.
Oh, I had no idea.
So none of the Zoomers are going to be coming in and saving that system.
So that's the thing like now. That's the thing. The local the local police force is taking out lemonade stands.
Oh, they're going door to door.
That's door to door. They're going door to door now. Okay.
Of lemons, I should say.
I think what's going to happen is But the thing is also that these people are not very brave. I mean, if you saw what happened when the Capitol protest occurred and people came into the Capitol, I mean, you didn't see people standing there. I was watching the movie Waterloo, and Napoleon escapes from Alba, and he comes across all these French troops that are coming there to arrest him, and he approaches them and says, "If you want to kill your emperor, here he is." And they are given the orders to fire on him, and not one of the soldiers shoots him. But he was willing to get shot over, not becoming the emperor again, because he believed in it. And another thing from that film that really struck me is he's dictating a letter to some prince. I think it was the Prince of Russia, and he says, "I didn't usurp the crown. I found it in the gutter." And I was thinking, imagine some guy, some Marine colonel, who, I'm not going to go into details about what happened. Let's just say he starts running the country, and he says, "I didn't destroy the Constitution. I found it in the gutter." And who's going to argue with him on that at that point?
Not many.
Yeah, there's just like
anybody.
And then they say, you violated the law. And Napoleon in the film says, "He who saves a nation violates no law." People can argue against that logically, but that is, if you're dealing with a country that's in a moment of crisis, that is very powerful rhetoric. When a country feels like its own survival is at stake, so that's where I think the silver lining is that this is creating an opportunity to where potentially, maybe somebody's able to come in, whereas before no one, people wouldn't listen. They wouldn't.
So it would almost force someone to come in.
Well, what happens when? Because I don't think Biden makes any of the decisions. I think it's his.
No, he's an Alzheimer puppet.
Right. He doesn't even get to decide what diapers he wears. But what happens when one of them, like they just go crazy, and we're talking about them launching a nuclear weapon or doing something insane that could start a war. A war which military commanders know they are either not going to win, or it's going to start something that I don't know. It's hard to provide specifics, but where somebody feels like they know what's going to happen, and they feel they have some sort of moral obligation to the country to do something. And
I think one of the main problems we've been facing, I would say since the late 40s, maybe even before that, but definitely late 40s, early 50s onwards, and it's something that Mictobus had talked about, is the deconstructing of America from within. That's the battlefield that we're fighting, because we are a military power. We have guns. The public has guns. That's not how you fight a war anymore. That's not how you take down a powerful nation.
All right.
You deconstruct it from within. You get a hold of the younger generations and you brainwash them. That's what's happening now. If you go back and you look at the history, and you look at it decade by decade, what you have to look at is all the policy changes that are made internally, both with the United States and our neighbors.
Right.
That the deconstruction is all about policy changes. That's what's happening. And a lot of people are going, "Oh no, you're a conspiracy theorist. This just can't happen anymore just because we have salad shooters, dildos, and computers, and we're civilized. Doesn't mean this shit can't happen again." Communist creep. It's been happening slowly over decades.
They're trying to delegitimize. Yeah,
exactly.
Wokeism is just the latest iteration of this attempt to delegitimize all the institutions, to try to paint them all with this tarred brush of illegitimacy and evil, and it's all bad, and we're being subverted. Though all the institutions that should be there to carry on the traditions, the educational system, the military, the judiciary. I mean, not so much the judiciary. I think that's probably the least corrupted, but the political system. There's all this, attempt to delegitimize and to brainwash, kids that patriotism means nothing, ideas mean nothing,
truth means nothing.
Truth means nothing. Don't read anything. Don't do anything. Just get on Google, plug into the internet, and do what you're told. and don't question anything. And this is where we're at. This is where we're at, and it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one thing that remains to be seen is whether COVID, the response to it and the way people respond, is going to create basically some sort of schism within the country where you have states where they've moved on, and they're not going to be ruled by fear. It's a free society, like you're seeing in Florida and to some extent in Texas and a little bit in South Dakota, or like I live in Washington State, and
you do.
I know it's like
we're like in the Pacific Northwest by any chance?
Well, I'm saying that in case somebody in the audience doesn't know. I know you guys know. It's Branch Covidians left and right. I mean, that's what I call it. They're just it's pretty amazing, and it transcends religion, politics. Like I've talked to people on the right, I've talked to people on the left, I've talked to people who are ardent atheists and people who are very.
It doesn't matter. Yeah,
it doesn't matter. They're like, this is absolutely, an issue. It's an existential threat, and we need to do whatever it takes to get rid of it. And so I think, this is one of the things I wrestle with as I continue to live here, whether I want to stay or go. But I'm wondering.
I hope you're wearing a mask right now.
Oh, hell no.
I hope you're wearing a mask, TJ. Is that why you don't want us to see a picture of yourself? As you don't have someone's going to report you.
What's funny is I live kind of on the outskirts of the Western Washington, and we're supposed to be wearing masks indoors. I've been going around. What? Nobody's wearing them. And you know what's funny is as a reporter, I get to ask.
You should be wearing them in the shower.
Quintus, swim. I could tell you. Okay, I've seen people hiking alone in the wilderness wearing a mask.
Dude, that's I don't want to hear. Don't tell me that stuff. That's depressing. I don't want to hear that shit.
Yeah.
Like, where's a bear attack when you need one?
Yeah. And so what's funny is people are not really complying very well. And the other thing is, employees for private employees, you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old working in a grocery store. You're not deputized to enforce these laws. Like this is the job of the police. And so I've talked with some employers where they go to our L&I, Labor and Industries, and say, so have you deputized our employees? Because if they haven't, they can't physically do anything about it. And they go, well, just tell them to leave. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, well, and then they'll say, we'll fine you $900. Well, if you're a Fred Meyer, you're like, hell, $900 is like
just turn over. You know what? Yeah. You meet that with the logic that it demands it. You give them monopoly money.
Yeah, it's just like
you give them $900 of monopoly money. Here you go for your fake fucking fine. You can have some fake fucking money.
Well, it's just like $900. It's like, okay, that's a bad weekend of shoplifting or something like that. So they're just not enforcing it. So my hope is that that's going to go away, but they're going to double down. I mean, in Oregon, it seems to be the worst.
Well, I think you guys are going to have to solve the problems of the world here. I'm gonna sign out. I think I've said as much as I can say. I've been on for an hour.
Yeah.
So
we're up on the hour mark. I appreciate you coming on the show.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And we just gotta keep the morale up, though. We can't allow. That's the one thing I just think is so important. Like I'll just leave it at this: is that things can change on a dime. You just don't. No matter how bad things look, you just don't know where that good fortune can just change on a dime. So don't abandon yourself to despair. Don't just get enmeshed in this negativity, because there's no end to it. Because once you go down that road, there's just no end to it. Then it becomes why even get out of the bed in the morning.
Yeah, right.
So you gotta you can't. That's a form of, I think, a form of despair as well, which is not
never extending suicide note.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So on that note, guys, keep the fires stoked, keep crunching, and I will talk to you soon.
Sounds right, good, Quintus. Take care,
later. Right. Take care, guys. Peace.
Later.
That was pleasant. He's a chill guy.
Oh, absolutely. James, you want to read this one?
Mektuba says, the only mask TJ wears is the Captain American one he donned while having late night thoughts about Ingrid Bergman.
Who doesn't have thoughts about late night thoughts about Ingrid
Okay,
Bergman?
okay. We really need to get this
not
clarified.
like
If you think
friends.
Ingrid Bergman, first of all, Aaron is an example of what happens when you don't believe if you're on the wrong side of history on this one.
No, I think Ingrid Bergman's attractive. I think
I'm optimistic about the future. Gonna have
No,
a nice
I know
little
you are.
farm community next to the lake and shit like that. I'm not waiting for some lieutenant colonel to be president next.
I
As far
think
as I'm concerned, that guy goes against the wall last.
right.
You know,
Not
I
fucking
think
interested in. Oh well, this guy is going to take half your money now. Things are great. Fuck that guy. Crucify him to the Washington Monument. I'm not interested. I'm not buying what you're
Jesus.
selling.
You know, I think that the difficulty some people have, it depends on what their expectations were for this. I guess for me in my 30s, like what were we expecting? What world did we inherit? And also, some areas of the country have changed a lot more than others in terms of just either demographics or the cost of living. I mean, the real estate in my area, went from being a middle class state to where every house is $1 million. And so, you know, it's just getting insane. I'm in the middle of navigating the real estate here, and then the population's exploding, whereas other places it's dealing with economic depression and things like that. So I think for me, it's been trying to come up with a healthy, realistic expectation of what life is going to be like moving forward. But maybe some other people were just given a more realistic view, or maybe it was just more pessimistic. So I got something great. That's fantastic. So
Indeed.
yeah.
Oh.
Shane?
Yeah, like if you read my book, The Iridian, that is now on Amazon.
Yes, go pick that up, gentlemen. I'm gonna get I've already read I read an advanced copy, but I will be buying a copy for TJ to sign when he's out here for the Village by the Sea 2021.
Yeah. So that's a book. That's a book that I wrote while I was just thinking about this current just era where, you know, there's reasons to not be optimistic, but you know, in the end, you find the silver lining.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you find that silver lining, let me know, please.
You're first on. You're in the top 10 that we'll send out a telegram or carrier pigeon message to.
Well,
yes.
Part of the Masculine Geek subscription service. Is that how that works?
Well, yeah, we do have a private telegram group.
Oh, awesome.
You guys are and anyone who's not in Masculine Geek is definitely missing some of the latest stuff I've been posting.
Unless you're a spurg or retard, in which case you're not welcome anyway.
Correct. Yes, no spurgs or retards are allowed in Masculine Geek life.
Well, speaking of shows that weren't that, very good job tonight. I enjoyed listening to Quintus and enjoy looking at his work. I actually picked up the new book. It just got delivered in the last day or so. So
cool.
It's something I'm reading, as well as Doc's last book.
That's also good. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking forward to his new works. And speaking of new works, I think everybody here has something in the pipeline that they're working on.
I have 3 things that will probably be released in, my book cover designer I was on a call with last Sunday, he has a first draft finished that we're going to talk about probably this upcoming Sunday, and then work out some details with that and finalizing it. That will be the second Tesla Malone book will be released in October.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Laserdisc pulp detective fiction noir should be wrapping up on Punch Riot then. And I'll be getting that together, a new cover for release as a standalone novella series. And then I have another super secret project, which I would like to have finished. I can't talk about that too much.
Right.
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
But that will be released in around December, January as well. So within the next 4 months, I've got some stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know.
And TJ and I are finally. Yeah. TJ and I are finally finishing up the Masculine Geek handbook. So
cool.
Yeah.
And I know James is hiring a bunch of henchmen, flying monkeys.
Correct.
I got that reference.
Roughly accurate.
So, how's that going?
Not too bad. It's mostly just trying to coordinate everything with the move down to Texas. I've been offered some help by some folks recently in order to actually make that move happen. So it's probably going to be like middle of October.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if you need help loading up the truck, let me know.
I hugely appreciate that. I don't think I will, but we'll probably grab beers by the pick anyways, just because it's there. And
absolutely, yeah.
I could see you before I head out.
Are you going to be passing through Indy?
I'm going to be flying down.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't know if you were transporting the stuff down by hand and U-Haul or not.
No, it looks like we're going to have a pod, probably. Either a pod or a just loading everything up onto the Denali.
Gotcha.
Do you have a lot to you don't have a lot to take, do you? I mean, other than the motorcycle.
This monitor, got that tower. We're actually buying a mount for the motorcycle to pop on the back of the Denali.
All right, cool.
Yeah, two towers, 2 monitors, 2 desks, some clothes. That's about it.
So more personal possessions than Aaron, but not nearly as much as some people we could name, including at least one person on this show.
Who's yourself?
who shall remain nameless. But
and myself as well. It'd take a lot for me to pack up all these fucking books.
I have a stack of books.
That's
something down with me. Not much more than that.
So is this going to be your new home base in Texas? And
oh yeah, we signed the lease yesterday, so it was. My buddy's going to be down there in about 10 days. I'm going to be down there in the middle of October. It's exciting. There's that. Jesus Christ!
Don't hit us with that. Don't hit us with that kung flu virus. Holy shit!
Wow.
Not the right kind of doctor in the house,
right?
Yeah.
How you doing, Doc? What's up, Doc?
Good. Doing good.
Good.
Cooler here today. A little cooler, but yeah, you can obviously just see you got the graphics bundle going. So
cool.
I got a funny story. First, Quintus was awesome, but so I'm getting older. So Doc's like, should do the colon test, right? The Cologuard.
Mm-hmm.
So did, but UPS didn't pick the box up for 2 days, so it's sitting outside my house.
Oh shit!
You know, the well-marked Cologuard box you can see from the road. And so I'm like calling UPS. I'm like, hey, is someone coming over to pick up the box? Yeah, we got you on the route. I'm like, but so like where I live, it's pretty close to schools, people walking past, and of course, the Cologuard box. Hey, rides up front with the guy, but yeah, I don't know. It was just funny. It was funny. I'm like, come on, pick the box up.
Right.
Guys, you're embarrassing me.
You're embarrassing me. Yeah. Actually, it was embarrassed. At this age, you're not embarrassed, but
there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, at least you're not like the old guy in the movie Car Wash. Like spent all week trying to get his urine sample to fill the bottle. And the guys at the car wash think it's a bomb, and he's the mad bomber, and they rip it from him and trash it. And it's like, it took me all week to get that urine sample. So there's a flashback to a movie.
You're in trouble.
Only 10 people who've seen it.
You're in trouble.
Yeah, definitely. You're in trouble. So
that's right.
Isn't getting old fun, Doc.
Yeah, what? I'll be 50 in a couple of months, so actually I feel really good for 50. Like being running and biking and things, and probably stuff I would have done in my 30s. So physically, I haven't fallen off the cliff yet. But 2 years ago, I ripped my hamstring just taking luggage out of my car on vacation. So. I'm limping around for 2 months. How'd you injure that? I took a backpack out of my trunk. And
hey guys, yeah. I gotta head out.
TJ,
good seeing you. Talking to you.
It's good chatting with y'all.
Yeah. So does that make what, Vince and I probably the 2 oldest farts in this on the show tonight? Because because I am over the 5-0 mark. So, and of course, James is just a little sprig.
Yeah, born yesterday.
Yeah. So, but you're every bit as cynical and hard as the rest of us old farts. So,
well,
good company.
You're raised online, which I don't mind.
Yeah. So Doc, you said your new book is at the publisher now?
So the book is complete. About 235 pages, depending upon how they format it.
Mm-hmm.
So next week, actually, it will be submitted. So the book is complete. What is happening right now, the endnotes, there are 428 endnotes are being formatted. And I'm having the endnotes so by doing thorough endnotes, I don't need a bibliography. So it saves a step. But Chicago style. So my first book was APA style, which is kind of my native as an academic. So doing Chicago was completely new to me. So how the hell do you, and no two examples are the same online. And some of the stuff, like, you just have to kind of cowboy and figure out how you're going to, like I had an image with a couple Pixabay graphics inside. So I'm like, how the hell do I cite this? And, but yeah, no, yeah.
When I was at university, all of the English classes, as far as those that taught writing, all they taught was APA, and that's all they accepted. But every professor on campus would not accept that format. They wanted it in Chicago. That's how they wanted it done, and that's how they want, the history department, the philosophy department, all of them. And that's all on the same university campus. It's like, you do realize that your English department is teaching everyone here a different way of writing academically. And
when I did my PhD program at UW-Madison, like, they never once covered APA or Chicago style. I mean, it was one of these things you're just supposed to figure out on your own. So I had to meet with the writing people and get tutorials and stuff, because I'm like, how the hell do you cite this stuff? And so anybody listening, if you're citing an APA, then you're putting the author's name and date within the narrative. But if you're doing that like 400 times, it can get really clunky for somebody to read that, especially if it's a book for a general audience. So by just putting numbers in, and then putting the endnotes at the end of the chapter or the part, it speeds it up for the reader. So I love it from that standpoint. It's much more fluid, but it just is not my native. It's not my native language there to function in it. But I've learned, and I work with an endnotes editor on that who takes it and mends everything. But so yeah, I'm thrilled. I had a kind of the final meeting with my publisher this morning, and we hammered out actually a better kind of parameters for the book than what we initially had in the agreement. And for anybody publishing, I think one of the advantages for me is I didn't sign my contract until I had the book done. So I would feed pieces of it, and obviously the publisher knew it was solid, knew it was coming together. But for an author, you have much more leverage when you have that final product, and they know that it's turnkey, right? They can proof it, meaning they put it in format, you check it and everything like that, and get it out there fast, which relatively fast in publishing. So I learned that from the first book, where I signed a contract which was much more advantageous for the publisher than it was for me, although it got me exposure, and the book shows up in a lot of libraries. But yeah, that was a big step. And then so I'm thrilled right now. I'm kind of on this thing with the publisher. We're talking today about the audio version of the book, and one of the things was, do they do that, or should the author read the book? And so we're kind of working through that. Initially, I was going to outsource that, but now I'm thinking, I'll probably at least give it an attempt. I have a pretty good radio voice. I have the time, right? So, being virtually retired, so I want to give that a try, which was something I probably wouldn't have done, even a couple of weeks ago. But so yeah, it's actually, so right here, is the entire print, book, 239 pages, and going through this.
Cool.
And yeah, I mean, so it's about population level burnout during extended chaos events, and what it looks like throughout history, and how you can kind of identify when this is starting to happen and get yourself out in front of the pack and those that you care about. There is actionable advice. It's a very good book. Thanks. Heavily reviewed, heavily edited. I interviewed Larry Lawton, America's Biggest Jewel Thief. He has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He's had an A&E special done on him last month. He is a character in Grand Theft Auto. So the only question I had for Larry was, I said, tell me about 9/11, like how you found out about it, because he's in a maximum security prison, like a Ted Kaczynski type setting, and no one had asked him that. So it's fascinating. And I interviewed 10 people who just came from all different obscure kind of backgrounds like that. And was just asking about this velocity of information or speed of information in a direction. How did you find out about things, or how did you make things? How did you make sense out of things? I interviewed a guy who was a commercial airline pilot, had a private pilot's license, and he lived by Oroville, California. So they had the Oroville Dam, which now it's not even running, there's not enough water. But in 2017, the water was coming up and it destroyed the spillway. So they had to use the emergency spillway. If it would have eroded back, it would have flooded Sacramento. So, the media wasn't covering this. And he went up there with his plane and started to do video and stories, and he could track online the water in, the water out. And he's, got like 500,000 views on the video, and got a pass so you could go up there and watch what was going on. But so that kind of civilian journalism, like how do you actually figure out what's going on when no one's telling you? And interviewed Nikolai Razavayu, who was on this show, and the Soviet cyclist. So over about 3 months, we had intense conversations about his time racing in the Soviet Union, and the day after the Chernobyl accident in 1986, when he was in Kyiv, hour away. He's told to race, and they're soaping up the streets and washing the radiation off, but they're not telling anybody. So it's an absolutely fascinating book. And it took me, I started in March of 2020, writing it and completed it last week. So yeah, I'm thrilled, by it that it came together like that. So at some point I'm going to come on and kind of talk about the process of putting this book together.
Are you expecting, or the publisher expecting, any flack from anybody or from any corner?
So yeah, Rob, it's a great question. So when I got the book out to a number of reviewers, and not a confirmation bias thing where people are just telling me, oh, it's a great book and whatever, because it wasn't a great book. Like I had some chapters that I needed to go back and I asked people, because I address Black Lives Matter in the book, and is this going down? Are there different conspiracy things that you're pulling out of the book, or are there political vibes or things like that? In one part of the book where I talk about lexicon, how our language changed. So I'm also a licensed speech language pathologist. I talked about the Amy Barrett, Supreme Court confirmation, where the word preference changed overnight in the dictionary. So that's in there. So, I mean, yeah, there will be certain things, just as with School of Errors, that will get some attention, but actually, I think if you read it, you're not going to be tilted to one side or another politically, or it's meant to keep you in the game, wherever you're coming from. Right. That it's not going to be polarizing. And I really had that from start to finish with my reviewers. I'm like, you have to let me know if this is shading one way or another, because then someone's just going to put it down. And so a lot of stuff got cut out. I actually had a section about the UFO stuff where the government was, and the reason I had that in was saying, no one paid attention to that, really. Like, it wasn't headline news. And God, when I was in college, like, if someone would have mentioned something like, UFOs on video, that would have been crazy. Like, that's all people would have talked about. Now it's like, whatever.
Yeah, I remember in the 1970s, people were talking about, the whole reason JFK was assassinated is because he was going to reveal what we have in Roswell. And I mean, that was like one of the things, and it was prominent enough that it would at least get coverage on things like, National Enquirer, and it may have even been mentioned in an episode of In Search Of with Vincent Price hosting. It was, but I mean, that it seems weird, but there's a lot of things I remember from my youth in the 1970s that seem eerily familiar to me now.
Like what?
Just some of the social things, as far as some of the political things, some of it is very superficial, comparing Biden to the Biden administration to the Carter administration.
Sure.
But I seem to remember there being a real popularity in the 70s with conspiracy theories. Now, obviously, this is before X-Files and stuff like that, but there was still Kolchak's The Night Stalker and things like that, and shows like In Search Of, that was always, and the exploration of the paranormal. That's all that stuff that kind of came out of the 60s hippie flower child vibe, new neo-religious Renaissance sort of thing, kind of morphed into almost a new resurgence of like Aleister Crowley spirituality from the 20s, brought back into
the fuck did I walk into
the 70s. and I'm just starting to see some of that, kind of feel that energy kind of again, and see people talking about that in various corners of social media and stuff like that, as if that renaissance of the conspiracy and the Illuminati and all the things that get brought up in.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about mostly, although the music's not nearly as good as it was in the 70s. So I'm hoping that comes back as well, if we're going to get any of the other stuff. But so
one thing I remember as a kid in the 70s is we had a place in town, but we also had a farm. So my parents were crop farmers, and I very distinctly remember a few times going out to the farm, and the dairy farm next to where our plot of land was. They would show you the mutilated cow that they couldn't explain that was out in the field. I remember this. Like, we'd go out there like on a tractor and the hay wagon and stop and say, like, this is out here. And I mean, and that stuff now, and back then media wasn't covering this and whatever, but it was the farmer of like, and just, some really strange, bizarre stuff. So it's interesting. I remember, I guess maybe the 70s as kind of the halcyon type of days. Actually, maybe some of the 80s too, but wow.
Well, I learned to read in a series of books called Man, Myth, and Magic when I was much too young to be reading books entitled Man, Myth, and Magic. And so, I was the only guy in my elementary school who even knew who Aleister Crowley was, because Ozzy Osbourne hadn't released his first solo album yet, with the reference to Mr. Crowley riding his white horse, or riding Ozzy's white horse, as it were. Sorry, Vince, it became Masculine Geek In Search Of while you were gone. And
what the fuck is this shit? Jesus Christ.
Jersey Devil.
Jersey Devil is always good, but
yeah.
And nowadays we call this schizo posting, where we just post unhinged shit in a Twitter thread and make vague conspiratorial intonations.
Mm-hmm.
Where I say, Joe Biden banged my local barkeep.
Mm-hmm.
I will not explain further.
He didn't.
And a thread, and this is what we engage in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's make mental asylums great again. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic.
We're gonna keep going until they bring him back.
Well, in a more humane way, but still asylums nonetheless.
So when Quintus was talking about running for office or taking some kind of leadership role, so I teach 2 legal courses, and one is for school superintendents, and something I've never had to do before. So I've taught for 20 years, and in the last 2 years, and gearing up for this fall, it's how to lead a terrified school board. I mean, these people that run for school board because of mask mandates and some of the curriculum choices, people are confronting them at their homes. People are breaking out windows on their cars and things like this. And so they're either resigning or they're coming in and absolutely not having critical discussions on decision making. So I'm having that discussion of saying, how do you interface with the committee, which basically runs your district? It's not the superintendent, it's the Board of Education, when they're unwilling to make decisions because they're scared. And I don't have a great answer for that. We go through that, but it's acknowledging that with the soup, you got to know what your board is feeling, kind of what that Overton window is. And one thing as a superintendent, so you're hired by a school board, and that school board can be, turned around in an election. They can be voted off, and the new board coming in, maybe they don't like you, and they vote you out after a year, buy out your contract. So also I see it in the superintendents of they're really unwilling to make big decisions because they don't want to move their family again. They've already moved 4 times, and they're 38 years old or something like that, and they have a home that hasn't been sold in some far off distance place. So part of it is saying, what are you going to take on? I mean, how are you going to lead? And lead bold. That's the thing, right? Like I was in that role too. Like lead bold, know what you're doing. Be decisive, and people appreciate that. I get so many emails that come in from non-school or government addresses after classes saying, "Thanks for covering this," and just this kind of holistic approach into life. Like, understand discretion, right? Like, who knows who has permission to make a decision? So one of the case studies we had last year, you write out these case studies, is you have a school track team. They take a van and they're competing somewhere, and as they get out, there's a riot that started. So they're caught in traffic, and the riot is starting to move toward them. So what would you do? What would you back if you're person driving that? If they got the kids out of there, or can they break the rules? And I mean, where does discretion lie? I mean, how does somebody have discretion to act? And so we have these discussions. I mean, whether it's that or it's something else. I actually had a case study I put together a few years ago, and the case study was, okay, you're a school administrator, let's say like a school principal, and there's an elementary kid with autism who wanders away from your school, and you realize, and this happens, this happens, goes into a wooded area, and there's like a stream and stuff like that. And as you're getting ready to send some teachers out there, you're calling police, and a lot of these districts are rural, they're out in the sticks. A neighbor comes over and says, "What's going on?" And it's like, "Hey, we're looking for a kid." And the neighbor's like, "I got a drone. I've got a drone with a camera. I can help look." And my question, I stop right there and I'm like, "What would you do?" What half the people will say? "I can't do it. I can't accept the help because I don't know who this person is. It's not part of our policy. It's not part of our protocol."
That's exactly what Quintus was talking about.
Half the people
taking action.
And I do it individually, so they can't kind of have a group consensus. So it's like, make your decision on this and then submit it, and then I'll come back to you. And the point is, if you're saying I need to get permission on that, no, absolutely not. You go on that, and if for some reason a board chickens out on you, then it's a sword to fall on or whatever. But you absolutely take advantage of the resources. You do what you need to do. You don't hesitate on that at all. Absolutely not. That's not. And these people are like, I don't know if I have discretion to do that. So
you piece of.
It's amazing though. I mean, how people can get brought into that, and they think they need those permission steps, to potentially save a life.
Yeah, even in a crisis situation where time is of the essence.
Right.
Well, how many generations have been bred, particularly by single mothers, to not take risk? Don't climb up in that tree. You can get hurt. Don't play out in the street. You can get hurt. Whereas in my generation,
we still heard that. We just never paid attention to it.
Well, but playing baseball or football out in the road in front of your house, growing up in a suburban neighborhood close to a large city, it wasn't like there was a field to go play in. So if you were going to play out, and you had a very small yard, the street was it. And while I can remember being told not to climb quite so high up in a tree, I don't ever remember being told to get out of the tree altogether.
I have no idea what's being said or not said, but you are correct. And Doc, you even talked about this about children and their range. Their adventuring range, as far as like it's shrinking over the years. Like their radius around their home base has gotten smaller and smaller as the years have progressed. Whether it's a single family household or it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
right. So I presented on PBS, and I had a slide on that in 2013. And so 100 years ago, it was 3 mile radius, and basically kids would be gone. Sun up to sundown, no one was checking in on them. And
for Robert and I, that was kind of our radius was a lot. That was the average. Our radius knew no bounds.
And then the next generation, it gets down to 1.5 miles, and then actually to the current generation, when I present it, it was 300 feet was the range, or basically kind of down a city block or something like that. So it was it was absolutely crazy. Right, like when we were growing up, when I was growing up, the city where I grew up, there was a swinging bridge over the river, and it had been there, from like 1920 or something, because they had a well across the river, and when the bridge would flood out, they had to get over there. But it was wide open, right? So as kids, you'd get out there and you'd be swinging sideways on that thing, and sometimes kids would fall off, and everybody was fine. I mean, you'd be down in the water and you'd be back out. And then, that thing got totally fenced off and stuff like that. You can, as a kid, you could probably still get on it. You'd have to climb through all the fencing and stuff like that. But it was, this roaming range has gone down. And the other thing that was happening, I talked about the rise of virtual field trips. So parents saying, we're not going to send our kids to Washington, D.C. during the day. And, this was back, 5+ years ago. To see Washington Monument, things like that, because it's too dangerous. So we're going to do a virtual field trip. And there were businesses making bank on this. Like they'd come in and do the virtual headsets. I had a picture of it on the PBS, and kids are walking around a gym, and they're like, right here, you're at the Vietnam Memorial. Reach out, and it was just insane, right?
Yeah.
And that's backed off a little bit, but I still think this whole thing of authentic experiences it's so degraded from what it was, in allowing kids that opportunity.
I seem to remember, I think it was John Stossel who did a report about a little girl whose parents let her walk from her home in the city. I think it was in New York. To walk from their brownstone in New York to the subway and take the subway to school. and then reverse the process at home.
Right.
And it was a big scandal. They were trying to get child services involved to take the child away from the parent. And, and here even recently, I think there was a family that was arrested because their child was playing alone on the playground, down the street from the parents' house, like a block away. And
just to play all alone, nobody around, and you're just like goofing off. You're wandering and adventuring.
Yeah, you walk the block down the street to the school where the playground is, so you can swing. And next thing you know, police are showing up. Who are you? Where are you from? And where are your parents? And now your parents are under arrest for child neglect. And
crazy.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Indeed.
And I understand, and of course, a lot of it. How many news stories have we seen about child abduction where, anytime you don't see your kid, there, some, Chester from Hustler is going to be, taking your child. And a lot of that, that makes great news stories. But also there are some places, I think in eastern Pennsylvania, somewhere around Philadelphia, there's a Target that the locals say you do not take your child to that Target because they will disappear because there are child traffickers operating in that area.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, well, I've got a family that just relocated here from Pennsylvania to Indiana because they found the political climate a little bit friendlier than eastern Pennsylvania.
So a dangerous area.
A lot of places are a lot friendlier than eastern Pennsylvania.
So, but obviously some things you can take down to urban legends or urban myths in a local area. But some things you can actually look at the, crime statistics and, they either will bear fruit or they won't. And they may not necessarily prove anything definitively, but, if, you have a city that has a violent crime problem, and when you look at the numbers, it's like, wow, it's all within this, 2-mile square on the northeast side of a certain city or, whatever. But just listening to it in the news, it's like this citywide epidemic, but it's a citywide epidemic that's confined to like a 2-mile square or even less than that sometimes. So unfortunately, what we get in the media and in the news is not always exactly what's going on.
It's very rarely accurate.
Right. And of course, there are certain people that make money off of it. And, it's, in fact, I think someone on this panel has written a book about that. Yeah.
So as you're mentioning that, so in the new book, The Velocity of Information, a full section is devoted to what is called member checking. And what member checking means is that you have a group of, I guess, trusted friends around the country or around the world that you can check in with on a regular basis, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. And you ask, what are you observing where you're at? Like when you go to the grocery store, are things stocked? Are they not stocked? Are they requiring people to mask up? Are they changing hours? What other things, mandates? So I did this. I led a group, and then I also talk about Joe Dolio, who was part of a group. I interviewed Joe, so Joe's in the book, and I was doing this on a regular basis and talk about how I formed the member check network, what I was gathering from it, and right away I learned, for example, one member. It was Chuck Mack. He was sharing that out in Allegheny County, right, Pennsylvania, that he had an app on his phone, and it was showing the COVID places in town, like the blocks where you had people identified as COVID positive. You could get it down to like the house level. And so he's sharing this out, and I'm like, whoa, like that's crazy. So is anybody else seeing this? No, but it was linked through the local newspaper. You could go online and get this site. So then we talked about it. We're like, well, what does this mean? Like, if we start to see this in other places, does it mean they're going to restrict delivery to those areas? Are they going to stop postal? Does it mean that all deliveries are going to stop? And I mean, so we're trying to think these things out. It never manifested. But, we saw things like the coin shortage, and immediately within days, all of us saw stores putting credit only up, so you knew, like, strengthen your credit lines. But, it was amazing to have those member check networks of, again, what we don't use the term I observed a lot. And I wrote about it in the book. I mean, I don't want to know what they said. I want to know what you observed when you were out. So Brian Bowden, who was on the show, Brian Bowden did 4-minute walkthroughs in the Bronx. And he had his camera out and he's like, here's what I see. Here's what's going on. Here's how it's different. And, we kept processing these videos in. And it was really, and there's also this transitory process. When you do that, you start to see how things are at one point in time and then how they're over time. But so having a member check is so important, of even that like 5-6 people that you go to on a regular basis in different areas, to just try to figure out what's going on and that you're not chasing headlines. So it was an amazing experience for me. And then to get, write about that as somebody who was leading one of those groups. So my youngest daughter was 9 at the start of the pandemic stuff in March. And her friends were, emailing her and saying, hey, they're ripping out the playground in town, or the playgrounds and all this stuff. And she's, she's getting pretty worked up about this, of what's happening and whatever. And we're telling her, hey, you can't visit your friends and whatever. We don't know what's going on. Things are being shut down, stay at home. So I just decided one day, I'm like, here's the deal. Like I grabbed, camera, the tripod, stuff like that. I'm like, let's go see what's happening. And we went out and we had 13 of these in vivo experiences in the community. And so we went to the parks. We saw that they were taped off, but they weren't dug up. There was a big sand pile they were putting in, like a volleyball area in one of them. So it looked like that. But we went to the hospital. We went to the Walmart parking lot. We went to the bank. We went to the armory. We went to all these places, and we did it 13 times and made this video collection. And then what was different from one to the other? She's doing the reporting. Here's what I see around here. But it was so important to do that for her. She's 9. 1 year of COVID is 10% of her life. For me, it's 2% of my life. So, that was something really important, to get her to see what was authentically going on versus like what her friends are telling her and what she's seeing David Muir puke out on the news at night. It was an all-star moment as a dad to do that, and to teach her that critical thinking, and it was really I wrote about it, in the book. And so that's something too, as younger people, the last 18, 2 years, I mean, it's been a bigger chunk of their life, right, than it's been for us. So we got to help them kind of see. And then also, predict what do you think is going to happen next, or like, hey, they took the tape down at the playground. So, yeah, our city, and they actually, when we were recording, they pull up in a squad and threw the lights on right next to my car. So, because it was a basketball court and only one person was allowed on the court at a time. There's a sign, and it was the two of us, and we were spaced out. And she's doing reporting, and they pull up, and throw the lights on, and kind of give me the, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, like, I'm recording a video, so get out of here. But
Doc, you have a question from Twitch, because we are streaming to Twitch as well.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, exponential decay. Okay, when am I going to have a live stream? Well, I have great news to share. The great news is that, so the Safety Doc podcast of 153 episodes, the last podcast I did was in December. And there were two reasons why I have not done a podcast since. And one of the reasons was the book. I needed to devote my time into writing The Velocity of Information. And so that was one. And another one was some more global issues with the way that I had covered some material that needed to be sorted out in more of a legal arena. So that prevented me from engaging in with my audience. But I'm ready to come back and actually, I want to go with some different formats. Go with some shorter episodes, which might just be 20, 30 minutes, and then mix in some of the longer ones. So yeah, I'm excited to do that. Break down some of the stuff in the book and some of the contemporary things. So yeah, cool. I appreciate that.
And we'll have Doc back on the show to talk about his book when it gets close to release date in February. So
yeah.
Cool. All right, we're coming up on the hour, almost hour and 46 minutes and 37 seconds. Yes, we count the seconds here at Masculine Geek. All right, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So, James, where can everyone find you for the moment?
You can find me at Asher Creativity on Twitter.
There you go. Doc, how about yourself?
Okay, so here's the deal, right? SafetyPhD.com, which was hacked and turned into a pharma site for Cialis, which is true, right?
Lots of boners on the site, yeah.
So yeah. And so I did work with GoDaddy. They fixed it, but now Google has to re-crawl it. So I put in that request. It hasn't happened yet, but actually, if you click, it goes to the website. Safety.
Look at this. Look at this sorry bastard right here. He shows up right at the end. What's up, Fred? It's a good dog.
It's red.
It's red. He's like red at the end.
SafetyPhD.com. Yeah. And by the way, if you know people, or if it's you and you've got kids going back to school, I did 2 PBS presentations on school safety. Both are excellent. And the one in 2019 and SafetyPhD.com will link you out to that. They've been showing a lot, just showed in Jacksonville, I think last night. But I mean, it's an hour long, and it really is going to give you an idea of what's happening for school safety and what's not happening. And as a parent, what you need to know, and is free, right? It's PBS. So best presentation, I ever gave. So check that out.
Cool. Very good. And last but not least, Mr. Robert Tusculan.
Oh, Robert Tusculan on Facebook and Twitter, primarily on Twitter, also on Instagram and on YouTube, where I do the occasional pirate live stream where I play music or just bitch and moan. Actually, no. I just vent my spleen a little bit, but mostly I talk about geek and nerd stuff, and then it disappears. It's like the mist in the wind. And, of course, hanging out with the Masculine Geek whenever I can. So there you go.
And we will be having our Return to Rawls campaign. Him as a DM next Wednesday, which I think is September 6th at 9 p.m. Eastern. And then the following week after that, we'll be picking up Drew Bay's campaign. So back-to-back D&D games for the remainder of the month. All right, everyone.
Which, if you missed, you really missed some crazy stuff, especially in that last session.
Oh shit! There was a holy crap! Yeah, that one scene where my character's throwing the lightning bolt, you're coming in with the hammer, and then Bint is climbing up. Yeah, the giant's back with the little dagger. That would really make a great Frank Frazetta book cover illustration.
Yeah,
it really would. Yeah,
we
gotta get on. We need to find someone to do that for us. I'll help pay for that. That'd be great.
I know some artists in that industry, so
we'll have to talk. We'll have to talk.
Shop it around, yeah.
Exactly. So, but yes, tune into the D&D games. They're fun. Even if you're not a D&D player, it's entertaining. Put it on the background while you're cleaning out your sock drawer. You'll be all set. All right, everyone. TJ's not here to take us out, so James, take us out.
Whoops. All right. Keep the fires burning. Keep the lead flying down range. Keep the wine flowing. And do not, I repeat, do not accept any wooden nickels.
Rah.